I ever tell you about the time Keith and I made fireworks? I ever tell you about the time Keith tried to deep fry a turkey? I ever tell you about the time my buddy Keith drove his car off a cliff, broke both his legs? I ever tell you about the time my buddy Keith drove his car off a cliff, broke both his legs? I ever tell you about the time my buddy Keith...
Ever tell you about that time me and my buddy Keith decided to watch a Black Ninja video? Well, my friends, that is today. I do apologize, by the way, for the horrible Keith imitation. That was just for the lulz. But anywho, welcome back to another video, guys. I hope you guys are well, and welcome back to some more Left 4 Dead rankings. In today's ranking video, we're going to be ranking all of Ellis's Keith stories from worst to best. This should be a fun one because Ellis has tons of Keith stories, and there's so many of them that we can actually compile them into a rankings list. So that's what we're going to be doing here today. Let me know in the comment section down below what is your guys' favorite Keith story. I know that there's going to be tons and tons of favorites, and I do have my own. That's why this list is going to be personal to me. Normally when I make a list, I do try to like keep the community's opinion in mind and like notice what's popular. Sometimes it's just best to end up having these rankings be opinion only, and that's why I think it's best to have this ranking be opinion only, just because I feel like this is going to be based off of everyone's sense of humor and just opinions based off of Keith in general. So anywho, guys, enough being said, let's just jump straight into the Keith stories, and if you enjoy, drop a like, but let's get on with the memes.
Give me your memes!
So here's a fun fact about the first Keith story here, is that the first Keith story is only going to end up being a Keith story if you have the German copy of the game, because according to the Left 4 Dead wiki, the story that involves Ellis seeing people dancing in a mall with his buddy Dave is only Dave everywhere else except for Germany, where in Germany this is actually a Keith story. So basically, we've heard this story many times before, but we did not know that in the background this was secretly a Keith story. So I'm just going to play the line that you probably have heard before at some point, and just substitute Dave with Keith.
Man, I love malls. I do. Once I was in this mall up in Atlanta, and these guys were dancing for like money and stuff, and my friend Dave and I was all like,
Ellis, sweetie, can this wait?
So yeah, the more you know. Just thought I'd just also mention, by the way, is that when it comes to these Keith stories, is that I'm not going to be including any fan-made ones or ones that are not a part of the canon of the story, which means I'm actually not including any of them that are community-made, only ones that are specifically made by Valve. So in case you guys were wondering, however though, since this is an official one and it's just a part of the German version of the game, that's just why I thought I would include it. So yeah. Alright, so next is going to be the Ellis and Keith suck the head stories, and YouTube, I promise this is not what you think it is. Alright, enough with the jokes, roll the clip.
do you know what suck the heads means? Because I came down here with Keith once, and he didn't know. And I mean, it ain't nothing bad. It's about eating.
These first couple of Ellis Keith stories are probably going to end up sounding very short and not exactly like stories. They're kind of like just cut off a little bit too early because the characters interrupt Ellis, which I wish they didn't because it would end up making it where we can get some more lore on Keith. But that's just kind of how the story goes. But anywho, yeah, this one is really short and all it does is just kind of allow for just a funny sex joke. So this next voice line is going to end up being the only one that I don't have audio for. This is a Keith story about how that Keith had to have like basically a diet prescribed to him by his doctor. And I've never heard this voice line my entire life, at least not that I can remember. And I have not dabbled in the game files to try to force this voice line to happen. I don't know if you got to do a certain thing or if it was cut or something. The only proof that I have that this exists is that the wiki says it does. And so if you guys have any gameplay of this particular quote being said, please let me know and share it with me. But I've never gotten this quote in my life, and the only point of reference I can use is the wiki. So that's why I'm putting it so low on the list, just because I have no attachment to it. But yeah, that's one of the Ellis Keith stories that is on the list. Now, this next Ellis Keith story is going to end up having a lot more substance to it, although it's not going to be necessarily that funny or interesting, just because all it is just about Keith building a shack.
Man, all this mother reminds me of my friend Keith. Yeah, he was going to build a shack once to live in and all. And I know most people here, they build houses and they become shacks. But Keith, he was about jumping right to the shack stage. But he had no wood. So he got some mud and was making what we were all thinking was going to be these adobe bricks, you know? Like when the people out west made bricks and shit. Well, he had mud and...
We ain't got time for this, Ellis.
Now this next one is going to end up having 3 different versions. This is the story about how that Keith almost got married. This is triggered specifically on the passing campaign. So when it comes to this story, I don't know why there's exactly 3 different versions. Some stories do have like 1 or 2 versions, but this one has like 3 different ones. I don't know exactly why, because they really don't seem that different to me. Maybe they're just backup files, but the idea is that Keith ends up ditching his wedding and basically is a runaway groom. So this is the story right here.
I ever tell you about the time my buddy Keith got married? Of course not. That's a trick question. He never got married. You know, you hear about them runaway brides, right? Well, Keith was a runaway groom. And on his wedding day, it all started when... I ever tell you about the time my buddy Keith got married? Of course not. That's a trick question, because he never did get married. You know, you always hear about them runaway brides. Well, Keith, he was a runaway groom on his wedding day. Yep, all started when he... I ever tell you about the time my buddy Keith snuck into a wedding? He thought he was being smart, getting all dressed up and like, but it seems the preacher wasn't there, and they all thought he was the preacher, and well, he married him the best he could. I think that counts for them being married, but I don't know, maybe not. I think they named one of their...
I know that yes, those could technically be classified as different stories, but I just thought I would just clump them all together because they're so dang similar that I feel like it would be just kind of pointless separating them. However, though, if I was going to make them separate, they would all be back-to-back anyways, just in case you guys were wondering. Alrighty, so for this next story, this is going to end up being how Keith got the word moron tattooed on his head. It's funny, the more I hear about these Keith stories altogether, I realize the more he sounds like Johnny Knoxville from Jackass.
This one time, my buddy Keith on a dare got a tattoo. I'm a moron. Right across his forehead, man. Of course, he made $200 off that, so you ask yourself, who's the real moron, huh?
Alright, now for this story, this is going to be about how that Keith made his own homemade sushi, where he just ended up putting a whole bunch of raw chicken in his stomach, where basically he almost got salmonella poisoning.
I ever tell you about the time my buddy Keith made sushi? Yeah, his mom took him to a sushi place for his birthday, and he didn't want to go, but he turned out he loved it, man. But it's like $10 a sushi at one of them places, so Keith figures, hey, how hard could it be to roll up some raw food and seaweed, right? As it turns out, it's hard. Now, they say experience is the best teacher, and experience taught Keith that if you ever eat 3 pounds of raw chicken, it kills you. Now, luckily, Keith's brain went into self-defense mode and started shutting organs down to head the chicken off with the pass, and the doctors were able to get him out before his heart stopped. But to this day, Keith has no sensation in his right foot, and doesn't recognize his brother Paul no more.
See, the only thing that I think that's a little bit weird about that story and that I find kind of funny is that I like how that Keith suddenly just forgets about his brother the moment that he ends up recovering from his illness. It's just being like he eats enough raw chicken that somehow he messes up his brain to the point of no repair where he can't even remember his sibling. Hey Keith, it's me, your brother. You know who I am? Obama. Okay, next story. This is the story where that Keith gets trapped inside of a manhole. Wait.
I have several questions.
I ever tell you about the time my buddy Keith fell down an open manhole? He was unconscious down there for like a week. During that time, unbeknownst to Keith, they paved over him. Keith had to...
And then Ellis ends up getting cut off by the crew once again. I just really wish that the crew didn't cut him off, man. Like, it's such an unfortunate thing. I would love to see more of these Keith stories, because so many of them are just cut short, but at least with the good news is that some of them go on for a pretty long time. Now we move on to when Keith tried to deep fry a turkey.
I ever tell you about the time Keith tried to deep fry a turkey? 3rd-degree burns over 90% of his body. His doctor called up, like, other doctors to look at him because they'd never seen burns on top of existing burns.
I love how they just progressively just get more and more redneck as it goes on. Like, Keith sounds like basically what a Florida man is, like, almost to a T. Now we've got the story where Keith trolls people in the tunnel of love.
I ever tell you about the time me and Keith snuck into a tunnel of love? Man, if you get your spit thick enough, you see, y'all can hang a loogie off the overhang, right? So when smooching sons of bitches behind you...
Okay, Ellis, this is really not the best time.
Be quiet, Rochelle. You're just mad that Keith is a character that's not even in the game and has more dialogue and character development than you do.
Emotional, damn it!
Alright, moving on to the next story. So for the next story, this is going to be about the time that Keith and Ellis tried to sneak paintball guns on a roller coaster.
I ever tell you about the time me and Keith snuck a paintball guns on a roller coaster? I never heard of anybody else doing it, so I thought we might have invented a sport. So Keith called the patent office, but...
The reason I'm ranking them, like, in this order, by the way, in case you're curious, is because I just like how crazy they progressively get over time. They just get more and more just, like, far-fetched and just insane sounding. Regardless of whether or not that Keith is a real person or if it's just, like, a figment of Ellis's imagination, because there has been a theory about that for a while. I just think that it's funny how that they progressively just get more and more ridiculous over time. If you order them this way. Now we got when Ellis and Keith made homemade bumper cars. And yeah, this definitely sounds like something that Johnny Knoxville and Jackass would do once again.
I ever tell you about the time me and Keith made homemade bumper car ride with ride mowers in his backyard? mower blade wounds over 90% of his body. I didn't run him over either. He somehow managed to fall under his own.
Based off that last Keith story, I mean, Keith's getting to the point where now he's defying, like, basically all laws of physics. Like, he's getting so lucky. He's getting, like, that 0.1% where, like, he should die, and somehow yet he lives. Like, when people get sucked into, like, helicopter blades or something, like, he must be endorsed by Jesus Christ himself, because Keith does not deserve to live these scenarios. I'm just saying. He's just a Giga Chad dude at this point. He's Giga Keith. Speaking of Keith defying all logic and death, this is a story when Keith crashes his car and gets flinged out the windshield.
I ever tell you about the time my buddy Keith drove his car off a cliff, broke both his legs? Hey, it's not a funny ha-ha story so much as it's a make-you-think story. For instance, windshields look pretty durable, right? Yeah, not the case according to Keith. Son of a bitch flew right through that sucker.
Okay, so this is going to be probably like one of the last few stories that are just kind of like average, and then we get into the like the fan favorite ones that I'm pretty sure is everyone's like top few. And this one right before it is going to end up being the time about how that Keith ended up basically falling essentially into a river.
Hey, y'all. Yeah, I like this bridge you got. You know, this reminds me, my buddy Keith and I were once on a bridge just like this, man. Well, kinda, I mean, I was on the bridge, and Keith was sure he could jump the river without the bridge, so I raised the bridge, and well, did you know cars could float? I mean, for a little while at least.
See, the biggest thing that I noticed, like, out of all this, despite, like, Keith being, like, pretty much chaotic, is that Ellis is always a part of these stories, so it makes Ellis sound like a troublemaker, but yet he sounds like such a nice guy. It just shows you that sometimes your friends can just influence you in such a way that, like, can make you just seem like you're just irresponsible. I would never see Ellis doing this by himself. It's probably just Keith's influence. So now, this next story is long, but it's really, really funny. So I'm just going to just let it play, but I'll give you the summary of what it is that you can, like, expect. Basically, imagine that Keith just gets attacked by Mother Nature, and, like, animals just have a vendetta against him.
You know, my buddy Keith had his car drop in a lake off a bridge just like this one here. Yeah, so he was driving over it late at night, and there in the middle of the bridge was what looked like, in Keith's estimation, like a dead bear. So Keith gets out his car to find like a stick to poke at it, right? Well, it turns out it's just some lady's fur coat that must have fallen out her car. So, hey, free coat, right? Now, owls won't normally attack a man, but in this case, they were hungry, and that made them reckless, man. Keith reckons they must have been there for hours watching what they thought was a bear carcass, because as soon as he picked it up, them owls had claws in him an inch deep. Well, Keith figures his best bet is to jump in the lake, because owls can't swim. Well, them owls could. He fought them for like 20 minutes treading water, and during that time, a boat came, bridge went up, and down went Keith's car.
See, this is like the one time that Keith sounded like he was just trying to be a good Samaritan and not get into trouble, and then all of a sudden the owls were just like, nah, B. So this one is interesting. This one kind of has to explain itself because it's not what you think. All I'll just tell you is that this is just Keith just trying to end up getting into history, and I'll just leave it at that.
It's one time my buddy Keith started up a historic tour on account his mom took him to Colonial Williamsburg, and it's like a license to print money at them places. Now, you might ask yourself how an honest attempt to recreate the majesty of colonial times turned into raccoon fights at $5 a pop at Keith's backyard. Man, the answer to that particular question is that Keith is sharing a place with his two brothers, and them being assholes who wouldn't let him do it anywhere but the backyard. Well, add that to Keith didn't technically have any, history to put on display, but he did have a whole family of raccoons living in the chassis of an old car. And you begin to understand.
It's just crazy how that this story just goes from just talking about historical stuff to just raccoon fighting in a matter of like a couple seconds. Now this one I gotta give some props to Keith because this is just impressive. He must be really physically fit because this is the story about how that Keith managed to not get run over by a roller coaster for 20 whole minutes.
I ever tell you about the time my buddy Keith fell out the roller coaster? Yeah, he didn't drop forward, mind you, just onto the tracks, but the carnival people wouldn't stop the ride because all the other people paid good money and Keith snuck on for free, so he had to dodge for like 20 minutes or so.
Like, I mean, seriously, you gotta give, like, Keith some props. Like, dodging a roller coaster for 20 minutes, like, dude, I can't imagine how exhausting that would be. Like, the dude must do cardio, like, 24/7 because roller coasters go fast. And I can't imagine how difficult it would be to try to clear that, dude. That's just impressive. Good job, Keith. Now we got the story about how that Ellis and Keith were trying to make homemade fireworks, and I'll explain in a minute why I think that this is one of my favorite stories, personally.
I ever tell you about the time Keith and I made fireworks? Now, I didn't know shit about chemistry, but Keith figured gasoline burns, doesn't it? Third degree burns on 95% of his body. Man, people in the next city over were called to complain about the smell of burning skin.
So the thing I want to point out is something I only noticed while making this video. I never noticed this before because I would always just hear it like during like gameplay elements, so like gunshots and special effect and other voice lines. I've never just listened to this by itself this clearly. And so I never paid attention to the fact that when Ellis says the word gasoline, he has a lisp, and it's goddamn hilarious.
I didn't know shit about chemistry, but Keith figured gasoline burns, doesn't it?
Gasoline burns, doesn't it? It's just like, I can't even replicate it. It was such a perfect lisp that I don't know if that was intentional or not, but it's just so goddamn funny. So now every time I hear that damn voice line, I can't help but laugh. It's so freaking funny.
Gasoline burns, doesn't it?
Anywho, now that I've either ruined that or enhanced that voice line for you forever, let's move on to when Keith fights two gators.
I ever tell you about the time my buddy Keith got rolled by a gator in a swamp? Man, he didn't agonize it or nothing. We were just trying to grab two so we could piss him off and get him into a fight. Well, anyway, the third time Keith went under, I realized something was wrong. So
It's a shame that a lot of these stories get cut short because I really wanted to see the ending, especially this one in particular, just because it sounds so insane. It goes to show you that Ellis knows how to tell good stories, and this is why he's one of my favorite characters. He's a lot like me. Now, these last four are my personal favorites, and these are going to be probably your guys as well. I bet you they're interchangeable for a lot of you. But this next one is going to end up being the time that Keith spent a year living in a graveyard, and he got surprised.
my buddy Keith lived in a graveyard once for a whole year. It wasn't a dare or nothing. He just got kicked out of his house. He said he never saw a single ghost except this one time when a ghost stabbed him from behind and took all his money, and he might have just been a homeless guy because he had a robe on with two eyes cut out his face.
Realistically, Keith probably did just get robbed by some random person, although at first listen it does sound like he just randomly just gets stabbed by nothing and probably does get attacked by a ghost, which makes this just sound funny at first because I'm thinking of an actual ghost stabbing him. Now a sequel to Stupid Stories. Here is another one of my favorites because it just sounds so stupid. But this is the time about how that Keith drowned almost in like a couple inches of water while going on a date.
I ever tell you about the time my buddy Keith drowned in the Tunnel of Love? You wouldn't think it could happen because the water's so shallow, but that's how it gets you, man. Overconfidence. Keith was with his lady at the time, and he was yelling for her to save him, but she didn't want to get wet.
Yes, nothing so romantic like drowning. Now these last two are the most insane, so for this next one, second to last, this is about the time that the army almost killed Keith by blowing up bombs next to him.
One time, the army bombed my buddy Keith. He went camping and didn't bother to read the signs, and I guess they were just testing bombs that day. All sorts of stuff, too, not just regular bombs, like biological nerve gas bombs, shrapnel bombs, these bombs that break up into the air to like 100 smaller bombs.
Can you imagine if you were Keith in that situation, you're doing something like trying to like get ready to like go to sleep just out in the nice peaceful wilderness, maybe you like want to go to the bathroom really quickly, and then all of a sudden this just happens?
Commander, give me those fucking artillery! Oh!
So we got one last story, guys, and this one's going to be my personal favorite. I've heard this one the most, I enjoy this one the most, it's just very humorous, and I'll just show you why.
My buddy Keith tried camping out on top of a building once. He was shooting crows, but the police were too busy tear gassing him to ask what he was doing up there. He screamed for an entire year every single time he opened his eyes. Oh, man. At first it was funny. Then it just got sad, but then it got funny again. Oh, man.
I'm just imagining the police tear gassing him while simultaneously trying to interrogate him and just how piss poor it's going. Sir, surrender now or else. But yeah, guys, that's going to be it for today's video. I do truly hope you guys end up enjoying. If you guys want to see more ranking videos, including the last episode where we ranked all the Left 4 Dead survival maps, and that way you guys can end up being able to know what are the best maps for getting the killing spree achievement and getting gold medals on survival, then I definitely recommend that you check out that video. There will be a end card at the end. And if you guys also would like to financially support the channel, I tremendously appreciate if you guys could go check out my Patreon. It's always linked down below in all my YouTube video descriptions. Or you guys could use supporter creator code BlackNinja797 in all caps in the Fortnite Epic Games item shops because Epic is my very first sponsor, and they're sponsoring today's video, so shout out to Epic Games. Thank you, Jake Squid, as always, for being a Patreon supporter. I appreciate you, my dear friend, and I hope you guys end up enjoying seeing another YouTube video from the most unique YouTuber you guys are ever going to see. Thank you for watching, guys. I love you, and peace out.
Hey meme lords, Jesus here, and you better have enjoyed that video there by the eternal god Daddy Ninja. You should probably subscribe too, or the mighty Moab will come for your balls. If you enjoyed the video, you might like it too. And give me the memes. Flash, bang, boom!